Any savings made by the French in articles allowed by the governor and not consumed by them, the English confectionery, for example, were ordered by Sir Hudson Lowe to be credited to the account of government, instead of allowing the French to balance by means of them as they desired any increased consumption in other articles beyond the amount indicated by the scale. The distress produced among the French by the reduction alluded to in the foregoing extract, especially in Count Bertrand's family, was very great. The number of mouths to be fed was 45, independent of Chinese. And at this time, Count Bertrand lived in a little cottage at Hutsgate, about a mile from Longwood. And the scarcity of provisions, combined with the uncertainty of the time of their arrival, was such that Countess Bertrand has been occasionally obliged to send to the officer of the Hutsgate Guard to borrow a little bread for her children's breakfast, and wood to cook their victuals, as nothing of the kind could be purchased nearer than Jamestown, 5 miles distant. To obtain permission to proceed thither, moreover, was not to be effected without having first obtained a pass from some of the governor's agents. In consequence of the ambiguity and obscurity of the orders given to the sentinels, the men who brought the provisions were often denied permission to enter, and servants bearing medicines for the sick met with similar treatment. Such was the terror inspired by the consciousness of responsibility that the sentinels frequently stopped catechized and detained Count Bertrand and his family even when entering their own door. It may be necessary to explain to such of my readers as have not visited the continent that the French mode of living differs entirely from our own. The French breakfast, like the East India tiffin, consists of soups, hot joints, fowls, ragots, with wine, etc., being in fact nearly the same as the dinner, except that in the latter a greater number of dishes are served up. This necessarily caused the consumption of nearly a double quantity of meat. In order to make a soup consommé, about 30 pounds of the bad St. Helena meat were required by the cook, after which 42 pounds remained for breakfast and dinner, to be divided amongst 4 separate families consisting of 40 persons. All this was minutely and repeatedly explained to Sir Hudson Lowe, without any effect, however, until the arrival of the newspapers containing the discussion of the House of Peers upon Lord Holland's motion on the 18th of March, 1817. The representations contained in Lord Bathurst's speech in reply to Lord Holland upon that occasion appeared to produce some degree of embarrassment and shame, even in Sir Hudson Lowe himself, as he endeavored to explain them away by stating that his lordship's speech had not been correctly reported in the newspapers which had arrived, viz. The Courier, Times, Star, and Morning Chronicle, that he had received no official statement of it from Lord Bathurst, which he had no doubt would be materially different from any which had appeared in the newspapers. For my own part, I most solemnly declare that I would have infinitely preferred going into action with the enemy to entering Napoleon's room when sent for in order to explain some passages in his lordship's speech. For the first time in my life, I felt ashamed of being a Briton, and in my embarrassment thought that the best excuse I could offer was to avail myself of the one invented by Sir Hudson Lowe. Je vois, said Napoleon avec plaisir, qu'en s'adressant au Parlement, à sa nation et à l'Europe, le ministre anglais a justifié sa conduite atroce envers moi avec des mensonges tristes reçus qui ne durent pas longtemps. The details to which Sir Hudson Lowe descended are difficult to be paralleled. On one occasion, he observed to General Montholon in my presence that he thought the consumption of basket salt was too great at Longwood, that much more was used than at Plantation House, and therefore he desired that for the future common salt, sal gris, should be substituted as much as possible for it. To the same officer, he also subsequently observed that upon inspecting the washing bills of the families at Longwood, it appeared to him there was a charge to a large amount for the washing of shirts. At this time, by a regulation of Sir George Cockburn, the whole expense of washing was defrayed by government. but was subsequently abridged by Sir Hudson Lowe, and that upon making a calculation, he found the proportion exceeded 1 per diem for each person, which he thought very extravagant, and begged to remark that he himself was content with 1 daily, which he deemed quite sufficient. In a similar manner, and prior to the departure of Count de Las Casas, he wanted to regulate the number of fires at Longwood, where there were 5 families, by those burned at Plantation House, where there was only 1, without taking into consideration that the French were natives of a warmer and much drier climate than that of England, and consequently more susceptible of the effects of the cold and humidity upon the origin and motives which could induce a governor and lieutenant general to audit and scrutinize washing bills. It is for his panegyrist, the author of the Facts, to explain. The author states that he has visited the stores at Hut's Gate, which he says are fitted up and arranged expressly for Longwood, and contain every article for the first quality from London. It must be satisfactory to learn that Sir Hudson Lowe has, after 3 years' residence on the island, at last discovered the utility and necessity of a measure which was strongly recommended to him by various persons, and among others by myself, immediately after his arrival at St. Helena.